Not gonna lie, Space Marine 2's future is looking pretty good, and I'm feeling optimistic. Recently, Saber and Focus put out a Q&A that addressed some of the problems that the community has been talking about. And don't get me wrong, the developers aren't swinging in and fixing the entire game in the near future, but it's interesting to see where their priorities lie. What's important to me is that the developers are communicating with us at all. There's an open dialogue here, and that doesn't exist in many other games. So what exactly are Saber and Focus prioritizing? Well, to start us off, it looks like they're aware that the game has a lot of connectivity issues, and they're going to be ramping up server capacity to help mend the problem, and they even state that they're working night and day to reduce these issues. It makes sense to me that this is their main priority right now, because fixing the other issues in the game doesn't really matter if people can't even play the game. Next, the devs mentioned that they'll be buffing the AI bots in the campaign and tweaking AI aggressiveness in veteran difficulty. But listen, if you're the kind of player who's relying on bots to do anything in the campaign or operations, you probably just need more time with the game so that you can master its mechanics. In other words, just get good, you scrub. Anyways, this stuff is all important and everything, and the devs definitely need to improve these areas of the game, but next, they get into the good stuff: operations, quality of life, and PvP. Starting off with operations, they talked about how they're still collecting data on the assault class being less powerful than the other classes, and I can respect taking your time and trying to cover all your bases before leaping in to change things, but the most obvious change that needs to be made is to the jump pack. It needs to feel consistently good across all three game modes, and buffing it in operations wouldn't break the game at all. Many players would probably welcome the change. The devs agreed that the blocking weapon trait is useless. You need to take a look at your weapons and make sure you're not using this trait. It's 100% developer verified useless. Make sure that you're using a balanced or a fencing weapon. And finally, they talked about weapon balancing, specifically between the bolt rifle family versus the melt-a-gun. First off, they're going to be fixing the melt-a-gun healing bug, which is good because it's insanely game-breaking, and this should knock the weapon down a peg while allowing it to retain its deadly effectiveness. But bolt rifles are going to remain untouched, which is a little surprising. It looks like Saber is going to actually be nerfing the health values of a lot of enemies, which is good, I actually agree with this, but bolt weapons need more cleave in order to compete with weapons like the melt-a-gun, plasma, etc, etc. In Warhammer 40k Darktide, the bolt gun literally explodes on impact, and I think this is more indicative of how bolters are supposed to perform in 40k. Personally, I'd like to see Saber explore this angle. But nerfing enemy health across the board is definitely going to be a good change. Hopefully it makes melee weapons feel a bit better to use, because spamming combos into Majoris enemies or hitting them with heavy charge attacks for them to still be alive is ridiculous. Next, Saber talked about quality of life features. The first and biggest point they talked about was matchmaking, specifically improving it in a way that allows you to actually play the class you want to play. They specified that they don't want to remove the class-based restrictions on lobbies, which means they don't really want to see class stacking, but are planning on potentially allowing players to lift this restriction in private lobbies. But I want you to consider this. This is a casual game for beer-drinking dads, Destiny refugees, and Helldivers Andes. Class stacking wouldn't break the game, and if it did, all you would need to do was make sure that class-specific buffs and debuffs couldn't stack on top of themselves. Let people play what they want to play. This would be the ultimate quality of life feature. Next, Saber talked about how player toxicity is motivating them to change how XP is earned, which is good. Killing things and actually engaging with the game is exactly how XP should be earned in the first place. I mentioned this in my review of the game, but this is one of those developer decisions that directly shapes the way that people play the game. If you really want to get into this discussion, we can talk about people speedrunning missions. I know for a fact that there's a good portion of the community that hates this. They just want to play the game and kill things. But don't worry, I guarantee that once private lobbies drop, as long as they continue to reward XP and armory data, all of the speedrunners will disappear, because believe me, the speedrunners don't want to play with you either. Lastly, the devs talked about how saved loadouts not including skill tree customization isn't really a priority for them at the moment, and I agree mostly because it's obvious which perks are the best for every class. For most builds, you're really only swapping 1 or 2 perks depending on the weapons you're using. Every other perk that you should be running is going to be pretty obvious if you've put some time into the game. The real problem here is that the perk tree needs some hefty rebalancing. I want to really have to think about what kind of playstyle I'm trying to craft when I'm considering which perk to pick, but that doesn't really exist in Space Marine 2 right now. Anyways, enough with all this casual nonsense, let's talk PvP next. When it comes to matchmaking, Saber isn't convinced that 6-player premates are a good idea and are going to be relegating that to custom PvP lobbies. I can see where they're coming from here, but again, this is a casual game for beer-drinking dads, Destiny copers, and Helldivers gamer bros. This isn't Valorant, it's not competitive in the slightest. Just let people play with their friends, and that goes for crossplay too, to be honest. Next, Saber addressed a balance, mentioning that the community feels that shock grenades are OP, melee is weak, assault is weak, bulwarks are strong, and heavy is strong. They said they're going to take their time balancing these things, but they are looking at them. In my opinion, bulwarks and heavy should be more present in capture zone game modes. That's literally what the classes specialize in. In fact, that's one of the reasons why flash grenades are seen as overpowered. They counter bulwarks and heavies. Flash grenades definitely need to be nerfed, but the real change that needs to happen is that abilities shouldn't regain their charge on respawn, and their cooldowns need to be drastically tuned. Everybody should have slower ability cooldowns, with the exception of like the assault class. But honestly, the biggest thing that Saber talked about was that they have plans to improve team balancing after matches in the future, but it isn't really coming anytime soon. This is low-key the most important thing here because this seems like it would be an easy quality of life feature to address. The current matchmaking and lack of team balancing after matches actually seems really archaic by today's shooting game standards. And lastly, they mentioned that spawn protection is going to be added in the future, which is definitely awesome. We need it. The final thing that Saber did in this Q&A was address several of the most upvoted topics on Focus Together, their official community website, which is a big deal, by the way. This means they're actually reading our feedback. Huge W for Focus and Saber, I guess. And I'm just going to rapid fire through these, so pay attention. New lens colors are dropping in the next big patch. Chaos Space Marines aren't getting in-depth customization. Get fucked, heretics. New classes will be added eventually, but not anytime soon. Don't get on the hype train just yet. More armor colors will be added later, probably in DLC that you have to buy. Hey, gotta fund the game somehow. New melee weapons will be added in the far future, but let's be real, melee as a whole needs to be buffed so that it at least feels satisfying to use across the board. Saber will eventually allow you to customize your Marine's face, which is cool, but I don't really know anyone who's playing without a helmet. If you're one of these people, let me know so that I could block you, you freaking heretic. Lack of PvP crossplay will be addressed through custom lobbies. I'm not sure how I feel about this. We'll have to wait and see what custom lobbies actually entail. Battle Barge and Thunderhawk customization aren't really priorities at all, and the Pyre Blaster will eventually get added to Operations and Eternal War, which is cool. Customization of AI squad mates is being discussed. Honestly, the way they should implement this is by allowing you to prioritize which classes will be your AI squad mates when you don't have other players in your party, and allowing the AI to use your loadouts and character customization. This way, people can run an all Salamander squad with their bots, and I can run an all Deathwatch squad when I'm playing with myself. In the next patch, we'll be able to overwrite a custom preset armor profile with a default one. As for FOV sliders and shoulder swaps, forget about them. Saber doesn't really want to devote time and resources to adding these things into the game. Apparently, people want to get rid of class restrictions on cloaks and tabards, but Saber doesn't want to because of class identity. I could care less because Dark Angels are dumb. Iframes on gun strikes won't be added due to balancing reasons, which I think is a pretty lazy take from Saber. If a gun strike becomes available from staggering an enemy, I could see that not giving you iframes, but if you get a perfect dodge or perfect parry, you should be rewarded with a free, uninterruptible gun strike. This is the parry and repose to design philosophy from Dark Souls, and it works really well. Players should be rewarded for their impeccable timing. They shouldn't be punished for going for one of the coolest things that they could do in combat in the game. Overall, this was a good Q&A, and I hope that Saber keeps up with the communication. It's refreshing to have an open dialogue with a developer, and I hope that they continue to be receptive to player feedback. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.